in thinking about the sermon and preparing and reflecting, I really got a big feeling of thank you. And so I felt like I really need to express thank you and appreciation to you for being here this morning. So grateful. It would be very lonely without you. It takes some time to get ourselves up in the morning and get rolling, and it's so much easier, especially Sunday morning. I don't have to go to work. I got a break now. Let me just sleep in. So I really appreciate you coming to church. But also, even more than that, I'm really grateful for the number of years of sacrifice and devotion that are represented just in this group of us that are here right now. You've done, if you look at the resume of each one of us, if you really think about the resume of our spiritual resume, of things that we've done, the kind of outrageous and crazy and wild things we've done in our spiritual life, we've been amazing champions. We were pioneers. We were missionaries. We did all kinds of outrageous fundraising and challenged all kinds of limitations. We ran incredible campaigns. The world looked at the Unification movement and was like, they must have so many people. And they didn't realize there were just like 10 people in that city that pulled off that huge event that 1,000 people came to. Just amazing what we've done in our lives. And sometimes we forget that when nowadays we're kind of, we have a family, we're trying to love our family and struggling with the true rub challenges and husband-wife relationships and parent-child relationships and taking care of kids and worrying about paying the bills and just basically surviving. So even in all that, I just feel like it's important to thank you for your commitment. The commitment that you have to persevere in spite of all these things, and how much you have been committed to the ideals of the principle. A lot of times we've done pretty good sometimes and not so good other times, but fundamentally we have a deep love and commitment to God and to true parents and to living a life that's fulfilled through actualizing the divine principle. A life that's filled with genuine happiness and satisfaction because of our commitment to a higher ideal, something bigger. And the commitment that all of you have had and shown to the providence of healing and restoration throughout all of human history. Now, we're carrying on. We've taken a pledge and commitment that we're going to fix the problems of history. We're going to take on in our lives, in our families, in our relationships, the problems of history. And sometimes I feel like I'm not doing so well, but that's what we're committed to. That's who we are. And that's because we know that that's where our real fulfillment and satisfaction is going to come from. It's from that commitment to making a difference in the world around us. It's much larger than just what I can do with my small self. But the commitment to make a change and a transformation in the world and in human history. So, thank you. And thank you again for your commitment here and at the church here, the Sacramento Valley Family Church, your participation, your tithe, your donations. One thing I'm truly grateful for is anytime I have a need or something, say, I need some volunteers to help me move this or to do this. Or, we are so quick to volunteer, to step up because we want to help. Because that's who we are. That's who we're committed to be. And I'm so grateful for the actions of you, brothers and sisters, in our community. Isn't it great to have a band, that commits and makes that kind of effort, really, to really produce something for us? Let's hear it again for the band, right? Isn't it wonderful? And especially see the youngest ones, stepping up and challenging and growing. And you know that they're growing a lot by putting them into this challenging situation so that they can challenge and overcome themselves, develop discipline and mastery. Well, so in thinking about today's topic, what I wanted to talk about was being champions. Sometimes we forget what amazing people we are. and sometimes we need to be reminded of it. Especially, of course, the younger people, the second generation, that don't necessarily know what your parents went through or even who your parents really are, the amazing superheroes that your parents are, the kind of things that they went through, the challenges that they overcame. Before, they were the people who went to work, got the paycheck, cleaned the house, cooked the food, changed your diapers, took care of you at the very fundamental level. Before that, they were out there being superheroes. And the truth is, they're still superheroes. What they're doing in the family, at home, their commitment to you, and their commitment to something much larger than themselves. So, I was thinking about this, and, a lot of times, the thing that stands in the way of us being champions are fear, discouragement, all kinds of things. I'm reminded of this story. In California, we get a little bit of thunderstorms and rain showers. But back east, when they get a thunderstorm, it's a doozy. Especially when I was living in Oklahoma, we'd get these thunderstorms and lightning storms that would shake the house. You just quite frightening. And especially when you're young, those are pretty scary. Well, I heard the story about a young boy. He's really scared and terrified because there's this summer electrical storm with lightning and thunder, and his mom's in there is comforting him and saying, you're okay, yeah, you'll be fine. And so finally, he gets settled down and he's feeling brave, and mom wants to encourage him to be strong, and you're a big boy now, you're brave and you're fine. And so he says, well, but finally he's ready to leave, and last thing he says, well, Mommy, can you stay and sleep with me? And, moms, they're kind of, I really want to do everything for my child. But I know that he has to, grow up, and feel more like he could conquer this himself. So the mother, kind of, no, you're a big boy. I have to sleep in Daddy's bed. And so, as mom's walking out the room, she hears the little boy, and he says, that big sissy. So us dads can relate to that, right? Sometimes we are the big sissy, right? We're so grateful. So, being champions. Here's from Paul. Paul warned. This is actually in Corinthians, where Paul's warning the members in Corinth about the problems of idolatry and sexual immorality and all kinds of sin that they're being tempted into. And he says, the only temptation that has come to you is that which everyone has. Well, that's, you hear that and go, wait a minute. No, I'm special. The temptations that I'm struggling with, no one else has ever struggled with. Actually, we know that's not true, right? We're all dealing with the same challenges, different dimensions, different colors and flavors, but we're all dealing with the same challenges in our life. So Paul, when he's kind of telling them, look, you're dealing with what everyone is dealing with. And even more, as Father Moon has told us, he says, we're always going to higher and higher levels of challenge and temptation and indemnity, because we're committed to restoration, right? First, our challenge is restoration and temptations and challenges at the individual level. And then we move to the family level. And there's another person, a spouse I have to relate to. Whoa, a new level of challenges in our lives. But not stopping there, to our tribe, our society, community, nation, the world. This is the vision that we're continually growing and continually being challenged. We're the cleanup crew to help heal human history. We're the people who take on through the difficulties and challenges. Now, that doesn't sound like all that great a life, right? Well, come be part of the church that's going to suffer for the sake of mankind, right? Well, where does real fulfillment come from? Real satisfaction comes when we take on a challenge and we're victorious in it. When we confront and deal with a difficulty and we're successful. There's a satisfaction, there's a joy, there's a relief that comes with that. Genuine happiness comes from accomplishing goals and objectives. genuine happiness and fulfillment in our lives is all about challenge. You know, the traditional story about, oh yeah, when you die you're going to go to heaven and you'll sit up there and you'll just play harps. You know, after playing, since I don't play harp very well, probably not so great, but how boring that would be. You know, sometimes our vision of the kingdom of heaven is that, yeah, everyone is just going around and singing songs, you know. Honestly, we know God is a God of dynamism and incredible change. You know, just look at those thunderstorms and weather. How exciting and dynamic a life does God want us to have? Once we achieve a certain level of goal, we could sit there, you know, okay, I'm fine, I'm cruising along. But at some point, it's built into us. We want to do more. You know, I'm happy, I achieved this plateau, I'm good. But at some point, it's built into us that we want to go beyond. God designed us that way because God's looking forward to what you're going to do next. You know, the next thing that we overcome, the next challenge we face, and how we break through and who we become as we overcome and deal with the challenges in our lives. You know, Paul, this is the same verse, he continues talking about temptations and the challenges that we face in life. First, he's kind of giving us this discouragement. Look, you're not special. You're dealing with the same problems that everyone is. And we know that we're also dealing with the same problems of history. That's what we're trying to challenge. But he goes on in this same chapter, and he says, but you can trust God, who will not permit you to be tempted more than you can stand. But when you're tempted, he will also give you a way to escape so that you'll be able to stand it. There's always a way out. There's always a way for us to grow, to overcome, to break through whatever the barrier is, the challenge we need. Now, most often, that requires us to work with other people. We need other people. Most often, that escape way that God gives us is through the people around us. And because we're designed to grow in relationship, to grow with each other. And most importantly, in our relationship with God. Often that escape, that way out, is how God can work in our lives most powerfully. That impossible becomes possible. In the Bible, we read about a lot of the challenges that famous, righteous people in the Bible faced. One of the big figures of the Old Testament, yesterday we were in our Divine Principle study. Again, I encourage you, if you have a chance to come to and join us on Saturday mornings, we have a great fellowship. We have a breakfast together and fellowship and share a little bit. And then we study the principle and discuss and explore all kinds of different facets of the Unification teachings. It's really a great opportunity to grow our perspective and also to share together. So I want to always put a plug in that and encourage you, invite you. But we're talking a bit about the Old Testament, so studying the Old Testament. Some of those stories are pretty serious, pretty heavy, but one of the most significant characters in the Old Testament is Elijah. Right? We talk about the prophet Elijah. Of course, Elijah as he's the forerunner of the Messiah, right? But also, even in Jewish tradition, Elijah is kind of the standard bearer of righteousness, and because he was trying to get the people back on course. He went from the south. This is during the period of the separation between north and south of Israel. So he went from the south, Judah, up to the north, and was trying to get them to change. And he was quite a phenomenal guy. Actually, if you remember the story, he's the one that took on 450 prophets of Baal, the idol that they were worshiping, and conquered them all. 450 against one, and he won. He defeated them. Interesting detail about the story of this is that, during this divided kingdom, the king of the north at this time, his name was King Ahab. And his wife, actually, her name is quite famous. His wife was not Jewish. She came from Phoenicia, and she brought with her all the worship of Baal and all these idols. Actually, husbands, all of us know, our wives are pretty significant, right? They kind of keep us in line. They kind of keep us on course, And, I'm so grateful, And actually, brothers, probably all of us are pretty grateful. Because if I look at our church, and I look at most churches, where I see the faithful ones that are at church all the time and faithful, it's the wives, right? So us brothers, we need to be really grateful, because sometimes it's the wife that kind of keeps us in line, keeps us on course. Well, think about Ahab, King Ahab. Well, he's got a wife. What's her name? Anybody know her name? Jezebel, right? You ever been called Jezebel, a traitor? Jezebel. His wife's name was Jezebel. And like most husbands, where his wife goes, he's kind of following like a ring through the nose, right? So Jezebel, basically she influences him to support this whole worship of Baal and going away from the Jewish traditions. Powerful effect that wives have in the family. It's important. So husbands, we definitely need to be grateful for our wives that keep us on course. So anyway, after Elijah takes on all these prophets of Baal and defeats them, well, Jezebel hears about that. Those are her prophets. Those are her guys that Elijah is responsible for actually killing them all. So what she does is she sends out a message and says, I'm on to you. You're on my bad list. And your life is over. I'm going to kill you. So, what? Ezekiel, this brave guy, he gets that message, and what does he do? Does he tear it up and go, ha! I'm not afraid of you? No. Here's what the Bible verse says. He gets this message, and the message says, Elijah was afraid and he ran for his life. Whoops. Wait a minute. This is the upholder of the faith, the brave guy that stood down 450 of these prophets of Baal, right? What did he do? Like any man, he took it like a man. He took off and ran. Right? He was afraid and ran for his life. And the story goes on. He came to a broom tree and sat under it and prayed that he might die. Like, I've had enough, Lord. He said, take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. And then he lay down under the tree and went to sleep. Right? Like, took it like a man. Let's just go take a nap. Actually, this story is quite interesting because Ezekiel, this zealous man for the cause of God, and even in Jesus' tradition, he talks about, Jewish tradition, they hold a cup for all the ceremony. Whenever the circumcision is done, they have a cup there and a chair for Ezekiel, because he's the one that's going to keep them on course. He's the one that says whether it was done properly or not. Elijah. Thank you. So anyway, he runs for his life. He's hiding in a cave, and it's actually 3 times God comes to him. And God and he sends an angel, and Elijah hears it, and he just goes, "Oh, no, leave me alone. Finally, he gets him up and into action. But the truth is even these great figures in history, they struggle, right? Struggle a lot. They're not these superheroes like our Marvel Comics superheroes, like guys. Really challenged. Well, even if we look at the New Testament, Paul he ran through a lot of difficulties, and he talked about his own challenge and his own fallen nature. But this is from Corinthians. He's writing to them, just talking about his difficulties. He says, "Brothers and sisters, we want you to know about the trouble we suffered in Asia. We had great burdens there that were beyond our own strength. We even gave up hope in living. Truly, in our own hearts, we believed that we were going to die." Actually, Paul at this time was just so many difficulties. He goes on to say, basically, because of the grace of God, I made it, and we survived, and we're still here to talk to you. But in this day and age, we don't necessarily face these same type of challenges. We don't have any evil queens who are out to kill us, right? unless we've upset our wives, then that's a different challenge. But or we don't have the people who are torturing us and want to put us in prison and kill us, that kind of thing. But now we have things like when you get a new cell phone, it's just like torture to get it to work, right? New age of technology, or all this new technology is coming, especially for the old guys. Maybe you guys are comfortable with it. For like me, I work with computers all day long, and then I get this new this cell phone. Can I just call? What do I have to do? Just make a phone call with it. So we have all kinds of problems, and I'm taking it down a notch or two, right? From risking my life to the inconvenience of technology. But in many of you know, in my daily work, I work in an office where I build databases all day long, and I spend my day working on a computer, sitting in front of a computer screen, doing programming, getting the things to work, and sometimes it gets so frustrating. I mean, and this is the kind of typical error message that I get all the time on my screen. It's like, I'm writing the code and I'm programming, and then suddenly, what does the computer say? It jumps up and gives me this called stupid error. It says, you have attempted to execute a procedure that you should not execute. Click the help button to get help, and the help doesn't tell me anything, right? And I see all this gobbledygook behind it, and I'm going, what in the world is going on? And it's like, okay. Is there hope? So I say a prayer. Give me a revelation. And what God says, He says, start over, try again. Try again. Keep it up. Don't give up. Actually, this is kind of superficial, but we face challenges all the time. And sometimes they're just mundane things. This is how Father Moon puts it this way. He says, when your faith is big, the problems of reality seem really small. It's like, we can deal with anything, when your faith is big. But when your faith is small, reality looms awesomely, like a monster before you. This is the challenge. Fortunately, more experience that we have, the more easy it is for us to overcome difficulties and challenges. Like with my computer programming, I have faith that eventually there's a solution. That there is a way to make this work. Now, how long it's going to take, I don't know. But I have faith that if I just keep trying again. Most often what happens is that it's not a problem of faith, it's a matter of just frustration. And I just quit. I just have had enough. And then I come back to it later because I can't get away from it, right? Just like the problems in our lives. Sometimes it's like, I just want to shut down. But it doesn't matter. The problem doesn't go away. Hopefully, if we take some time, we might get a fresh perspective on it. And that's the most useful thing, is getting a fresh perspective so we can take on and deal with the challenges that we face in our life. Well, one thing we know for sure is our founder, Father Moon, never let reality get in the way of his goals, right? Yeah, especially some of if we think about our history, some of the things that we did, they were just outrageously absurd and crazy, and yet and seemed impossible to do, and yet we pulled it off because there was a commitment, and we just went for it. Now, there's a lot more that needs to be done than just going for it. There's in our own lives, we're often challenged to deal with what feels like it's impossible. Jesus puts it this way, in words of encouragement. He says, he looked at the people and he said, for people, this is impossible. These things may be impossible. But for God, all things are possible. So, Jesus is speaking about, the challenge people have of living a true life of faith. For each one of us, God is the part of the equation that we can count on. God is the part of the equation that we need to invite more often into our challenges, into the issues that we're dealing with and wrestling with. So I want to put in front of you a model to look at for how we need to deal ourselves with the impossible. The three key points that we need to look at to really break through when we're challenged with something, when we're wrestling with something, especially the seemingly impossible. This model actually comes from the way we want to educate our young people. It's from character education. The challenge that we have for everything in our life is the core base of this pyramid, the most fundamental for everything is motivation, and that comes from heart. So when we deal with any challenge, anything that we're wrestling with, we have to really want it. We need to find our desire. Power comes from desire. Our heart and our motivation and passion. We need, with any challenge or anything that we're facing in our life, we need to look at the core. What is my desire, my passion, my hope, my energy around here? Why do I want to take on this? Where is my heart with regard to this? Now, for young people, the first place that we go for this, the heart, the motivation to be obedient to their parents. When they're getting guidance from their parents, what is it? Now, we may think, oh, I'm afraid of being punished. But the most powerful force for us in being obedient to our parents is because we love our parents. We want our parents to feel good, to be happy with us, to feel joy, to be proud of us. Well, the same thing with God as our heavenly parent. It's not out of fear that we're going to be motivated to do things. It's because we love. Because we want to make God happy. We want to make God proud. We want to bring joy. We don't want to be a source of disappointment. The most painful thing for a child is to hear over and over, oh, I'm disappointed in you. Children want to know. I want to know how much I'm loved and appreciated, and my investment and my effort. And this is what I'm so grateful for the way God can work in our lives. God's presence is where we get that strength, that heart, that motivation. On that foundation, from our heart, we need to use our head. There's the intellectual understanding, on action, to get ourselves moving, to see and understand what we need to do to address the challenges in our lives, what we need to do to break through. And even more importantly, to get a perspective that allows us to see things from a bigger picture. Oftentimes, without understanding, it's just kind of like, there's no hope, but I'm kind of wandering around blind, and I have no perspective on what to do. But as I gain understanding, as I gain perspective, I gain power. I gain insight to be able to address what's happening. I have the heart and motivation, and now I have the perspective. So there's one ingredient that's still missing. What's missing? I have my heart. I'm motivated. I have desire to do this. I see what should be done. I see the perspective. I'm so smart. I figured it out. Oh, we're not done then, right? There's one more step, right? And that's our hands, our heart, our head, and then our hands. We need to take action on things. A lot of times we stall before we get into action. A lot of times it's like, oh, I'm just feeling all kinds of other things, even though I know I really want this, and I know what I should do, and I just don't take the action. Sometimes we just have to put one foot in front of the other and move ourselves forward. When we deal with challenges, our heart is the place where we have to start. What is my desire? What is my motivation? What is it? Why is this important to me? Why do I care? And then we look, okay, I know I care about this, but what's the big picture? What's the big perspective, my understanding on it? Okay, and the third thing is, okay, how do I put myself into gear, into action? Make that first step. We know that once we make that first step, the second step actually becomes much easier. It's the first step that's usually the most difficult. Getting ourselves into action is the first challenge. And once we're into action, then inertia begins. Inertia is a law that things that are at rest, where you're stationary, they tend to stay that way. And when you're in action, you tend to keep moving. Tend to keep moving forward. So, if we think about these dealing with challenges, Last week, James Chisholm spoke about the power of give and receive action, give and take action. Power comes from that interaction, from relationship, from a dynamic interaction and relationship. So, where do we get that power, that energy for heart, for motivation? The most fundamental place is in our relationship with God. This is the first place that we go for the deep power in our lives. It's through our investment in time in prayer, communion, worship, connection with God as our loving Heavenly Parent. Getting in touch with God's heart and God's love and God's motivation for things. And when we study divine principle, all the time, over and over, Father Moon is to remind us, when you look at history, think about what was God's motivation, what was God's heart in these points in history. God's desire is always to bring healing. So all those stories are about how God is desperately trying to bring healing in our own lives. The difficulties, the challenges that we face in our lives, it's all about God trying to bring healing in our own lives, that we can grow and break through and reach even higher levels of joy and satisfaction. But also for the larger picture. So for God's heart, we can be greatly motivated to do things. Not just out of obligation or duty, but out of love. This requires us to invest time with God. We need to spend time with our loving Heavenly Parent. Committing ourselves to daily prayer and communion with God, so that God can speak to us, God can comfort us, God can warm our hearts, God can encourage us. It takes our first step of investing in that time of prayer, that time of fellowship with God. Now, also, as we invest in that relationship with God, give and take for our head means gaining God's perspective on things. And this also comes from our prayer, but also comes from our study. This is why, as a church, we are so committed over and over. Study the divine principle. Studying the unification principles of God's work of restoration. God's principles of creation. How God works to bring about change and healing in the world. And the power that God has through the fulfillment of human responsibility. This is why always our investment, continually studying our daily, hunduke is the Korean word for our tradition of daily study, daily investment. So we need to invest in that head, in that understanding, that we can grow. And then finally, that hand, we need to put our hands into action. Now, that also means we're developing skills and talents, but most of all, all things in creation are God's tools for us to multiply change in the world, beginning with our own physical bodies. Putting these physical bodies into action to bring about change, to bring about transformation in the environment around us, but also within our own lives. We need to understand how God wants to bring change in the world. Most importantly, our hands are for the purpose of service, living for the benefit and making a difference for others around us. This is where we can find true joy, true fulfillment, and true happiness in our lives. Father Moon summarizes this. He talks about the province of restoration, and this actually comes from the sermon called The Pinnacle of Suffering. Right? That sounds very optimistic, right? But even at the pinnacle of suffering, Father Moon says, if you follow God's basic principle of heart, you will achieve victory. This is where fulfillment and victory and true joy comes in our life, by following God's basic principle of heart. Our job, our challenge, our most important challenge in our lives is to become the true begotten sons and daughters of God, our loving Heavenly Parent. To do that takes our investment, that's our commitment, our work. God is our loving parent who's always calling to us, who's always reaching out for us. Just that we ourselves will also reach out and receive God's hand, God's love, and God's perspective. Please join me in prayer. Good morning, beloved Heavenly Parent. Father, Mother God, you've given us so much. If we look and reflect honestly on our lives, it's so easy to think of the bad things and the difficulties, but through it all, we can see the amazing blessings that we've received and how much you've been working in our own personal lives to guide us, to bless us, to bring happiness and fulfillment in our lives, and how much you grieve and suffer as you see us stumble and struggle and suffer ourselves. Heavenly Parent, thank you for never giving up on us. Even though many times we would give up on ourselves, you're always there, anxious to be able to have the condition to work in our lives and work in the world around us. Heavenly Parent, as sons and daughters, we determine ourselves and pray to become the people you can work through powerfully, that we will become those vessels of your healing, instruments of your power and your love in the world. Thank you, Heavenly Parent, for the challenges that we face, and we determine as sons and daughters filled with your love and your presence to bring healing, to bring victory, to bring change. As your sons and daughters, gratefully we offer this prayer. Amen and adieu. So please turn to your neighbor and share your thoughts on reflections on the sermon today.